Hey everybody, I have a video here for you today. And if this looks or sounds a little different, the laptop that I have made my last 800 or so videos on, today, when I tried starting it up, it just said, nope, not today, not happening. So I am using my other laptop, and I have never made a video as far as recording on this, so I have no idea what this is going to sound like. But we are going to go down to a site in Alabama called Moundville. And I have had a lot of requests for this video, and this is a pretty important spot. This is one of the more impressive mound sites in the United States. Here, you get a look at it from overhead. There are different mounds, different sizes, and this is a pretty large area. And they theorize maybe about 600 years ago, this was an important site in the Mississippian culture, I believe it is called. But this, if I back out here, notice it's right by an elbow of the river, like a lot of these ancient sites were. But that is a look overhead. Now, in looking into these mound sites, I just put the same philosophy I used in my Egypt pyramid series. I think we just have to look at all these sites and just pick out what's different or unique about them. And in these videos, I'm trying to find different information for each site. I just don't want to say, well, here's a site probably built 1,000 years ago. Here's a few artifacts. This is what it looks like, and just be done with it. I'm trying to find unique information on all these sites so we can put somewhat of a story together. And at the end of this video, the last 9 minutes or so is going to be a film made in 1937, about 9 minutes out of about a 15-minute or 16-minute video, and I will leave links below. But I just thought it was an interesting film. It is a black and white film. I know a lot of you people have to have everything in the highest HD and in color, but this is a film from 1937, and you can still get good, really good information from a black and white film, and that will be presented at the end. But I just want to go over to a few websites. Now I'm going to share a few different websites, and this comes from the University of Alabama, and I believe it is located fairly close to this site in Tuscaloosa. It says, the Moundville site, occupied from around AD 1000 until AD 1450, is a large settlement of Mississippian culture on the Black Warrior River in central Alabama. At the time of Moundsville's heaviest residential population, the community took the form of a 300-acre village built on a bluff overlooking the river. The plan of the town was roughly square, protected on three sides by a bastioned wooden palisade. Moundville, in size and complexity, second only to Cahokia site in Illinois, was at once a populous town as well as a political center and a religious center. And here is a look at one of the largest mounds, and that is similar to other sites. And here is a look at what this may have looked like in its original form. And here is a representation from one artist of what it may look like. And they had houses here, and they had structures on top of some of these mounds. Is this accurate? Well, I think some artists used his discretion here. Now I want to talk about similarities to the Egyptians and the Mayans. The mound builders had an importance related to Orion that was very similar. And let me just read here. This says, Moundville, Alabama's ancient Indian mounds led souls to the stars. It says, Archaeoastronomy evaluation at the Moundville, Alabama Native American Indian Mound Complex shows alignments to the constellations of Cygnus and Orion 800 years ago. And I have had a lot of comments on alignments to Cygnus and Orion, and there seems to be two camps. And I know Andrew Collins has talked a lot about Cygnus alignments, and I know Graham Hancock has talked a lot about Orion alignments. And at Göbekli Tepe, there seems to be a slight dispute between them on some alignments, and I just sometimes wonder, why can't we have both? And it appears to be this place. The alignment to Cygnus is on the very star that seems to be pinpointed at Göbekli Tepe and other sites such as Karahunj in Armenia. And here at Moundville, they also seem to have alignments to Orion and even the Orion Nebula, and I find that very fascinating. Now, I have showed you alignments in some of these mound sites. It says, and this is talking about a 1987 report, it said it also noticed that the solstice alignments were identified at Moundville, Alabama in 1971. At Moundville, the key viewing area for celestial events was clearly defined as the large central mound, a truncated pyramid presently about 21 feet in height, with a base of roughly 200 by 300 feet. That's a pretty good size mound. A lot of dirt in that mound. And that video that I'm going to show at the end kind of goes over how long it would take and exactly what is in those mounds as far as area and how much dirt. Now it says here, in recent years it has been discovered that America's mound builders often carefully place mounds at specific spots to allow for the observation of rising and setting of stars on the horizon across the tops of mounds and the temples erected on them. Mound location and earthen pathways were determined by these ancient Native American tribes to delineate the exact time for conducting a death ritual. The ritual was designed to aid the souls of the deceased tribal members in making the death journey to the path of the souls. The path of the souls ideology is so accepted today that the Moundville, Alabama Mound Museum has an audiovisual program devoted to it. It says, star alignments in the Path of Souls. The Path of Soul ritual involves 4 key alignments of the mounds and earthworks to the horizon. The 4 key stellar alignments in the Path of Souls journey took place on the winter solstice. They are the place on the horizon where the sun sets on the winter solstice, the horizon location where Cygnus constellation or the star Deneb sets shortly after sunset, and that seemed to be a key star, and that's cross-culture. The place on the horizon where the Orion constellation is first seen at sunset, and 4, the location on the horizon where Orion sets just before dawn. And I think that is key, and especially if you're familiar with watching Orion travel across the night sky, actually watching the stars. One additional stellar element is needed, that is the Scorpius constellation needed to be below the horizon and not visible when the ceremony took place. So I find that interesting that the Scorpion needed to be below the horizon, and I have talked about the Scorpion on the pillar at Göbekli Tepe, possibly not representing a constellation, but representing the fact that humans had to go below ground to survive the conditions at the end of the Younger Dryas. The core ideas in the Path of the Soul's death journey are well established and accepted by mainstream archaeology. It was believed by many mound builder tribes that the soul, termed the free soul, made a journey to the stars after death. The journey could only be taken at a time when Scorpius was not visible. This was because Scorpius was believed to be the ruler of the underworld and would snatch the soul. It says, on the evening of the winter solstice, the soul journeyed to the west, where it came to a body of water. It then waited till early morning when Orion's Nebula was about to descend below the horizon. Orion's Nebula is a fuzzy spot below the 3 belt stars of Orion. The ancient mound builders saw the constellation of Orion as a hand. Just before the nebula descended below the horizon, the soul made a leap toward the nebula. The nebula was thought to be a slit in the sky, a portal called an oji, that allowed the soul to pass safely through the underworld during the next day and into the Milky Way. And the Milky Way was their celestial riverway that they paddled upon. It's the same as the solar boat from Egypt. Now, did they just develop the same symbolism and the same afterlife myths, or did it come from one common source thousands of years ago? That is a great question to ask. Now, one of the main symbols that was found at Moundville was this, the hand with the eye in it, and this directly relates to the Path of Souls and the destination of Orion. Here are some other pics. Here you see a disc that was found, and here you see the hand with the eye. And this seemed to be represented maybe like the entrance to heaven. That's the best way I can depict it. And why do I say that? Well, because that's what the ancient text seems to say. Here is another depiction. Here you see the three symbols of Orion. And just reading about this, they say the Pleiades is represented in this here also. But maybe the disc here, these circular things also represent Orion and the placement around the belts of these figures. If I notice up here, the navel seems to be represented on what appears to be a raccoon. I found that interesting, and that symbol is also the symbol for the sun in Egypt. Here is a bowl found at Moundville with the hand and what people say is the all-seeing eye. And you got to think of Egypt and the eye of Horus and Orion, and the eye is connected in some ancient text. Now it says the Milky Way was the path of souls. It was the same thing as the celestial Nile in ancient Egyptian text. It says, on the path there were various tasks, but the soul eventually made it to a fork in the path, the dark rift of the Milky Way. At this split the soul encountered a judge, or a mediator, represented by a large raptor bird. Constellation of Cygnus was the bird. If the soul passed the test, the soul was allowed to make a final journey out of the sky. But here is the ritualistic bowl with the all-seeing eye, some call it, in the hand, and the hand appears to be a representation of Orion. Now, I just want to show you this, the Lakota tribe, the three belt stars up here in the wrist, and then Orion's sword, or whatever you want to call it, is represented by the thumb. Here is how they represent the stars. People in different parts of the world saw the stars in different ways. This comes from the Lakota tribe, but I have talked about the hand and Orion in other videos, but here just gives you a look on how it is represented. Very important though, the all-seeing eye seemed to represent the Orion Nebula, and that was a place of great importance to many ancient cultures. Now here is one more website I found, and this had a few more depictions of what this place could have looked like. And there was dwellings on top of this main mound here, and there was celestial alignments made based on that largest mound. Here are a few more depictions off the Black Warrior River. And I found this one coming up pretty interesting. This one right here. It was theorized based on what they found that there was a pool possibly around this one right here. I found that pretty fascinating. Now, what I haven't mentioned in a few of my previous videos and some things that were found out here, there was dogs found out by these mounds, little dog effigies, and it appears that they were like biting a human head, and people have theorized that the dog was placed out by these mounds in a representation of some sort of guardianship, that it was guarding the site, these dogs. Does that relate to ancient Egypt and Anubis in front of the Great Pyramids, and Orion being a place of the afterlife? Well, it matches up perfectly. Now I'm going to play that 9-minute video, and I will leave links for the full video below, plus these websites I have used. And I found this 80-year-old film to be fascinating. It's not obviously the highest quality because it's 80 years old, but I thought it was very informative. And here's that video now, and I'll just join you for a second when it's over.
Peace-loving, industrious, and highly organized people who were led to their home by the river's friendly waters, fished its pools for much of their subsistence, and used its shells to express an appreciation of beauty which has remained across the ages to mark them a race of superior intelligence. A story of the warrior, too, current in its application to modern ideas of public recreation. From the coast of the Gulf of Mexico, along which the civilization traveled to Moundville, is about 225 miles by way of the Tombigbee and Warrior Rivers, natural waterways for the ancient inhabitants. Moundville was the center of the culture, although there are minor evidences of it at 3 other nearby places. In the central part of this ancient city, there are 34 mounds in a clustered group, 18 of which form a hollow square, most of them oriented very close to the cardinal points of the compass. They are medium to large mounds, and all of them of the truncated pyramid type. The entire metropolis comprised about 300 acres, part of which is now occupied by the town of Moundville. It is on the central tract of 175 acres owned by the Alabama Museum of Natural History and embracing the principal mounds that Mound State Park is being developed. These Moundville people have been called an industrious people. The magnitude of the task they performed in building the mounds may be cited as proof. The largest mound is 58½ feet high and covers about 1 3/4 acres. It was once, like all the others, sharply rectangular, almost square. 28 of the mounds have been measured. They contain approximately 350,000 cubic yards of packed dirt. There is reason to believe that the dirt was carried in woven baskets, each holding about 35 pounds, more than 100 basket loads to the cubic yard. Using the estimate of 20 minutes as the time required to make a round trip with one basket load, one arrives at the astounding total of more than 1 million man-days of work. That is, one man toiling from sun up till sundown for more than 4,500 years. The population of the area probably never exceeded 3,000. Occupancy and this amazingly industrious mound building must have continued over a long period. Prodigious energy in glorification of some deity, for all these mounds are of the ceremonial or domiciliary class. They're not burial mounds. Atop most of them, if not all, were temples. Ramp construction is a detail which seems to link them to earlier structures in Middle America. The construction method of both temples and dwellings, the latter clustered about the mounds, has been established. Green saplings of appropriate size were embedded in trenches and drawn together at the top by withes of cane and reed. There were circular bowl-shaped fireplaces in the centers of both temples and dwellings, and the smoke curled out through holes left in the roofs. Formal seats of the same modeled clay as that in the fireplaces are still found in both temples and dwellings, for the ceremonial chief in the temple and for the patriarchal master in the dwelling. Plaster made of mud and cane leaves was used in the lower part of each structure. A thatch of cane leaves and grass covered the upper portion. In excavating, as the basis for scientific conclusion, meticulous care must be exercised. Any single square inch of the entire 175 acres at Moundville may disclose invaluable information. Here is a practical example of searching for a needle in a haystack. The first step is to plot the area into uniform mathematical squares. These squares and numbers on a corresponding sheet record absolutely everything of interest that is found. There is reason to believe that in the Moundville culture scheme of things, cemeteries as we know them were not important. The living kept their dead very near to them. Burials were apparently made underneath the dirt floor of the house in which the family of the deceased was living at the time. Pits were about 18 inches deep. Bodies were usually fully extended on their backs. Bundle burials were rare. Stone discs and slabs are characteristic of the Moundville culture, more than 80 of such objects having been found. They are invariably made of sandstone, similar to material outcroppings above Tuscaloosa, about 18 miles to the north. Not only is their mechanical precision remarkable, but also the incised designs with which they are decorated. With the use of only primitive tools, the task of making such an object as the well-known rattlesnake disc must have been a tremendous one. Versed in the lore of some of the ancient orders that hark back into ancient days will be stirred by some of the objects that have been uncovered. They'll see significance in the all-seeing eye, a decorative design which appears frequently. If objects associated with their owner during his lifetime were buried with him, and they undoubtedly were, they'll find their own meaning in a ceremonial mace, which might have been a gavel, and in an incised pendant, which may have been a charm. And even in the days of these Moundville people, there seems to have been some significance in the number 7, for ornamental beads in this exact number were used. Ancient civilizations are rarely thought of as having existed where we of today go about our routine tasks. Remains of the past are most frequently unearthed in far-off places. At Moundville, this culture of centuries ago has been uncovered in fields long planted to cotton on the edge of a sleepy little southern town, and within a few minutes of the seat of Alabama's foremost state educational institution. Plows turned up the first recognizable evidences of it 40 or 50 years ago. Burials are now uncovered by the simple process of removing a few shovels full of loose earth until a stratum of harder clay is reached, a natural base on which human bodies and cherished worldly treasures were tenderly placed in the dim and distant past. It is weird and eerie to find with so little effort a fireplace unquestionably fashioned by man, which can be used today exactly as it was so long ago, or a cache of mussel shells exactly the same as those found in nearby streams, which may have been dumped into a garbage pit in the earliest days of man's occupancy of the North American continent. In the development of Mound State Park with federal aid through the Civilian Conservation Corps as a recreational area with unparalleled educational features, it is planned merely to uncover some of the most interesting burials and preserve them for the public to see and to study. An early structure was a frame building over a number of burials with a runway entirely around it on the inside, from which one might look down on original clay bases, each supporting a burial of human remains and artifacts. Pottery making seems to have been the chief art of the Moundville culture people. Pots, bowls, and water bottles are the pieces most frequently found. They are shell-tempered and of several types of ware. Pots are normally plain except for handles and effigy shapes. Many of the bowls are adorned with splendid designs, and water bottles often carry the most elaborate engravings. Individualism of design was the established rule. Rarely is a duplicate found. Relief ornamentation is usually an effigy of the frog, the duck, the beaver, the bat, the eagle, the owl, the rabbit, fish and conch shells, grotesque animals, and human beings. Pieces in which the entire structural design, not merely the ornamentation, is in effigy, are the most interesting. It is not so much the manufacture of pottery, although a remarkable percentage of it is excellent ware, but rather the intricate and delicate incised designs which give the Moundville culture pottery such a distinct and interesting type. As a rule, the incised lines are so delicately executed that one can scarcely feel them with the fingers. Water bottles provide the best examples of this incision work. Indeed, water bottles without this treatment are rare. Among the designs are the plumed serpent, ivory-billed woodpecker, eagle, sun, hand and conventional eye, skull, and forearm bones, meander, and scroll. The Civilian Conservation Corps participation at Mound Park is varied. Under expert supervision, the boys are doing the excavating. On the mounds, they are repairing the damage already done by soil erosion and effecting safeguards against similar damage in the future. They're scheduled to build various park structures, including the museum. For the many people already visiting the park, and the record has been showing more than 1,000 a month, they serve as guides, not only on the park property, but at control points along the nearby highways. Informal group lectures in the park are given by trained technicians, but the boys have become so well informed on the subject that they answer intelligently most questions asked them. The Corps association with Mound State Park exemplifies one of those fine underlying principles of the Civilian Conservation Corps movement, sometimes overlooked. Wherever the Corps works, there are agencies and individuals just as much interested in the boys themselves as in their work. Here, it's the Alabama Museum of Natural History. Few boys who have worked at Mound State Park have failed to profit from educational help not only offered, but pressed upon them by the museum officials. Their interest has been stirred not only by Moundville culture artifacts, but also by other museum research, notably the discovery of the petrified remains of prehistoric animals which swam over much of the present area of Alabama when it was ocean bed.
Now, I hope you enjoyed that. I thought that was very informative. The mound builders, it's a great mystery where these people came from, why their symbolism is similar to other people from around the world. I'm going to be going into the dating and some questions I have in my next few videos, but I hope you enjoyed that. The mound builders is definitely a hazy mystery. Hope you thought that was cool, and you all have a very nice day.